I'm happy to be here for the second Gwinnett County 2045 Unified Plan Speak Up Community Education Speaker Series. These series are designed to educate Gwinnett County residents, leadership, and planning professionals, as well as interested professionals outside the county, about exciting and innovative community planning concepts. So I want to thank everyone again who's been involved in this project and bringing us to today. So we are excited to offer this second speaker series, and we have some great speakers for you tonight. But before I tell you a little bit about that, housekeeping. So restrooms, if you go outside these doors in the lobby, the restrooms are on the right. We have family restrooms as well for those of you who have children tonight. So thanks again for coming. So tonight we will have two national experts who will share policy and planning solutions on sustainable infrastructure and transportation relevant to Gwinnett County's local context and planning goals. We're happy to have you join us. Now at this time, I would like to ask Director Matt, you know I know your name, Matt Dickinson, to come to the podium to welcome you and bring greetings. He's also going to introduce Rebecca Shelton, who's the Director of Department of Water Resources. But before Matt comes up, I'd like to say that he joined Gwinnett County's Planning and Development Department in 2021 and was promoted to Director this year, so congratulations. Prior to joining Gwinnett County, yes, please. That warrants an applause. Prior to joining Gwinnett County, Matt served as Planning and Development Director for the city of Chamblee, Georgia, and an associate planner at Clark Patterson Lee and Associates. He also served in leadership positions in the cities of Dunwoody, Johns Creek, and Suwanee. So, join me in welcoming Matt to the stage.
Good evening, everyone. I've never been on a stage before, so I would like to start with a song. I'm just kidding. You don't want to hear that. That would be bad. As Dr. DJ said, thanks for coming out for part 2 of our 3-part speaker series. We're very excited to be here, and this is a great turnout. If you don't know, a lot of times the planning and development world, we don't get a lot of turnout. We definitely want to get as many voices involved in this process as possible, so it's great to see y'all here this evening. Definitely thank you to the Aurora Theater for hosting us. This is an awesome venue, very nice facility that we have here at our disposal. We do have a great lineup of speakers for you this evening. And just in case you don't know, the reason we're doing this is it's in support of our development of our 2045 Unified Plan. And that is Gwinnett County's comprehensive plan. A comprehensive plan is a document that we use to determine what type of development and redevelopment is going to happen in your community. So it's very important, and it's a document that looks 20 years into the future. So getting involved now, it's a great opportunity to make sure that your community develops in a way that best fits your expectations. A couple other things. So if you don't know, just want to pitch a few things about Gwinnett County. We are the largest municipal services provider in the state of Georgia, if you didn't know that. Our population is about 1 million. We're the second largest county population-wise in the state, quickly approaching Fulton County, and will likely pass Fulton County in the near future. We also have, of those 1 million residents, about 75% of those live in unincorporated Gwinnett. So that's a huge amount of people that we plan for in the community. We're very diverse. We're one of the most diverse counties in the southeast United States. Definitely the most diverse in Georgia. So with that, we do have plenty of information in the lobby about the plan, so please take advantage of that. There's also handouts about other opportunities for you to get involved. We'd love to see these faces come out again as we continue to develop the plan for the county. So with that, I will introduce Rebecca. So Rebecca Shelton is going to speak to you about the award-winning wastewater treatment system here in Gwinnett County and some of the challenges associated with that. Rebecca was appointed Director of the Department of Water Resources in 2023. She has more than 25 years of experience as a civil engineer and as a registered professional engineer in Georgia. She holds a Master's of Science in Civil Engineering from Georgia Tech. She was named 2022 Civil Engineer of the Year in Georgia. which is a great accomplishment. And she is very passionate about water resources and comes from 3 generations of plumbers. So welcome, Rebecca.
Thanks, Matt. Sometimes it said I have wastewater in my veins, but. All right. Wow, it's so great to see so many people here. All right, how many of y'all work for the Department of Water Resources in the room? Awesome. These are folks that are passionate about their profession. They are not here because they're required to be here. They're actually here because they're interested in the topic. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about our water infrastructure in the county. At Gwinnett Water Resources, we're really 2 utilities under one umbrella. So we're a water and wastewater utility. So that's your water and sewer bill. And then we're also a stormwater utility, which you see as a fee on your tax bill. So there's a stormwater fee that's billed annually. We have a very simple mission: superior water service at an excellent value. We serve almost 1 million people, so we've served the vast majority of the county, but the city of Beaufort has their own system, Brazelton has their own system, a little bit of Auburn and Loganville. But our main goal is to protect public health. That's why we exist. That's our purpose. And it's important to get safe drinking water to your home, but it's equally important to take away sewage, properly treat it, and before we release it back to the environment. That's equally important for public health. So we're going to go back to grade school, and we're going to talk about the Gwinnett water cycle. So here in Gwinnett County, all of our drinking water comes from Lake Lanier. So that is our sole drinking water source. We have 2 intakes on the lake. We send that to one of our 2 water filter plants or drinking water treatment plants. They have ozonation there. They have filters. Hello. They have filters there. Similar processes to what you would see with your bottled water ozonation. They have a granular media filter as well. And then we send it on to your house through our water distribution system. So that's always under pressure. That's why when you turn the tap, water comes out. We don't ever want anything to be able to go in. We only want things to come out of that system, right, to protect you. Once you use that water goes one of 2 places. So you use it in your sinks, your showers, your toilets, and then it either goes to the septic tank in your backyard. How many of y'all have septic tanks? How many? Yeah, about 25-30% of the county has septic tanks. Or it goes to our public sewer system, which is a separate set of pipes. And they flow by gravity downhill. So they're following the hill down, they're following creeks downhill. When they get to the bottom of the hill, and you may notice when you drive around here, there's a lot of hills. We have sewage pump stations that pump it up over the hill to the next sewer, or eventually to a water reclamation facility or wastewater treatment plant. We have some advanced wastewater treatment plants here in Gwinnett. We really are blessed. We have people that come from all over the world to see our F. Wayne Hill Water Resources Center because it has some advanced treatment processes, some of the same treatment processes at the drinking water plants, because it goes back to Lake Lanier, our drinking water source. So we make a full water cycle here in Gwinnett. So we also have that stormwater utility. So that's a whole separate system that goes from roads, typically roofs, driveways, straight to usually maybe a detention pond in your neighborhood or at the back of a property, and then straight into a river or creek or stream. We only maintain the pipe systems. We don't maintain the ditches in the backyards. Just the pipe systems is what we maintain. So what does all that look like in real life? So we have 2 drinking water treatment plants up on Beaufort Dam Road, 3 miles apart, right next to Lake Lanier. They each have their own intake, 248 million gallons a day of treatment capacity. This is our distribution system. So from the treatment plant, it goes into this distribution system. This is it growing over the last 65 years. We started in 1958. As you can see, we started kind of in Norcross, worked our way out. We cover the vast majority of the county. You can see the white at the top where Beaufort is, up in the upper right where Brazelton is. They have their own systems, but we cover the vast majority of the county with our distribution system. Now this is our collection system. We didn't start our collection system till the late 60s. So it's even 10 years younger than our distribution system. And you can see it kind of growing out from Norcross to the east and to the north. And this is what it looks like today. And unlike the distribution system, there's some holes in this system. Do you see some big white areas? What's there? Septic tanks, yes. We've got, does this thing work? Oh yeah. Lots of septic down here in the Yellow River Basin, right near that Stone Mountain. Lots of septic there. This area, we really don't have sewer service out in that area. We are currently building a sewer out here, but today, a lot of septic tanks in those areas. So from those sewers, it goes to one of our 3 water reclamation facilities. So I talked about Effingham Hill Water Resources Center, our largest facility, very advanced facility. We also have the Yellow River facility, which goes to the Yellow River. It's also a membrane facility, has UV disinfection. It's a great treatment facility. And then we just recently finished completely rebuilding our Crooked Creek facility, which actually goes to the Chattahoochee River. So that's a brand new facility right now. And then we have our stormwater system. For the county, we maintain the stormwater pipes that are in unincorporated Gwinnett and on county-maintained roads in cities. So each city has their own stormwater program. We do service the city of Lilburn because they have an agreement with us. But in general, cities do their own stormwater. We just maintain it in unincorporated Gwinnett and county-maintained roads in the city. Our treatment plants require us to have a watershed protection plan. And because of that, we do a number of things. We also have a stormwater permit for the county, our municipal separate storm sewer permit, municipal separate storm sewer, or MS4 permit. And those 2 things really require us to do a lot of things stormwater related. So we work with the Metropolitan North Georgia Water Planning District. It sets some of the requirements that end up in our Unified Development Code. That's what developers have to do for stormwater management when they do new development. We do a lot of protection in the form of public education. So we do a lot of outreach of things not to put in the sewers that causes sewer overflows, like grease. We do restoration projects, which I'll talk about in just a second, and we monitor everything through our creeks. We have a number of stations. We partner with the U.S. Geological Survey and monitor creeks throughout the county for water quality. So our watershed program ends up being a watershed improvement program where we actually do stream restorations, wetland restorations, we install stormwater management practices, and we monitor all of that long term. And so we've been really focused on doing that on county properties. We've really partnered with parks over the last few years to do a number of stormwater BMPs in parks. We're about to do a stream restoration in Jonesbridge Park later this year. So we really try to partner and make sure we have the best benefit for the community when we do those projects. And then because we do a ton of research to make sure we keep up to date with water technology, with what our permit limits are going to be in the future, making sure we can properly treat water as technology change. We do a lot of applied research. So we built the water tower. That helps us, but it'll also help nationwide, honestly, with water research. But they help us with applied research and also with workforce development. We can take someone who has a high school diploma and give them all the training they need to become a Class 3, Class 2, Class 1 water or wastewater operator, and they can support a family and have a steady job and good benefits. So if you know anyone who needs any of those things, send them our way. If they're willing to work, we have a job for them, and it really is a great career. It's a very rewarding career to know that you're providing safe drinking water for almost 1 million people every day. But we do have some challenges. We have to maintain all those thousands of miles of pipe I just showed, right? Nearly 10,000 miles of pipe. We have robust asset management programs, both in our pipe systems and our treatment facilities. We have tens of thousands of pieces of equipment, pumps, and different equipment at the treatment facilities that we maintain through an asset management program. But while we're doing that, we also have to plan for future growth, right? Make sure that we have those pipe systems in place for future growth, but also enough treatment capacity for future growth. And our real challenge right now is balancing those two. We want to make sure that we maintain what we have, but also plan for the future. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much for that insight, Rebecca. We appreciate your remarks and sharing some information about the county. Did you learn anything new tonight? What? What did you learn? Say it one more time. What you don't know. Okay. Over 46,000 hydrants, I believe I read. 46,000, that's a lot, right? Nearly 1 million people to provide service to, just in one county. So you can imagine what everybody does who works for Gwinnett County, how hard they work, right? So you have a whole new perspective, especially as you learn more tonight and other events. Thanks, Matt, for coming up and sharing a little bit as well. We appreciate that. So now I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Kristin Ihnchak, Vice President, Equitable Planning, Greenprint Partners. Kristin is the Vice President of Equitable Planning and Greenprint Partners. She is passionate about partnering with communities, particularly those in historically underserved areas, because her whole purpose is to create dynamic and accessible plans and tools that spur on-the-ground action. Her 16 years in the planning field have spanned both the public and private sectors, and areas of focus have included land use and zoning, sustainability, climate resilience, capacity building, and equity. Before joining Greenprint, Kristin worked for over 10 years at the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, the Chicago's Region's Metropolitan Planning Organization. She has a master's in urban planning and policy from the University of Illinois at Chicago and earned a BA in political science and metropolitan studies from Lake Forest College. Please join me in welcoming Kristin.
Hey, y'all. Did I do that right? I'm from Chicago. I'm going to break free from this podium, I think. Rebecca's presentation was a perfect setup for what I want to talk about tonight, so thank you, Rebecca. I can't tell where you went in the audience. Thank you. The water system, stormwater, wastewater, are very complex systems, and the diagrams you showed really helped to break it down, and it's kind of fundamental to what I would like to talk about today. I'm also really excited to be here and want to make sure to thank the county and the whole team that put this event together, because I really do believe that engaging community members in these processes is fundamental to achieving equitable processes that reflect the voices of everybody in the community. So before, as Dr. DJ mentioned, before I came to Greenprint Partners, I spent a bunch of time at a public agency and got to work a lot on public processes, and have found that really engaging with folks on these issues is important to get all the voices heard. So I'm very grateful to be here tonight. She also mentioned that I work at a firm called Greenprint Partners. We are a small women-owned consultancy that is based in Chicago, and we have a team of planners and civil engineers whose mission is to get the most good out of green infrastructure. And I'll talk more about what green infrastructure is in just a minute. Actually, can I see a show of hands of who knows what green infrastructure is in this room right now, just so I have a good sense. Wow, okay, excellent. So we're working with a good base of knowledge here. So, did I do that wrong? Yeah. There we go. Okay. So what I would like to cover today is first talking about what is the problem, why are we here, why was I invited to talk about stormwater infrastructure for Gwinnett County's planning process. And then I would like to talk a little bit about what a potential piece of the solution might be. I'm a little bit over-promising here when I say it's the solution. It's not the only solution. But you probably can tell from what I've said already that I'm going to talk about green infrastructure when I talk about the solution. So I'll just let you know that right away. And then I also want to highlight how green infrastructure can be used as a tool that can help to advance equity and community-led processes, because that's fundamental to what Greenprint does and the work that I do for the company. I'm going to pull in a program example from Cook County, which is the county that the city of Chicago is in, that we're working on right now, that is actually implementing a process to use community voices to elevate green infrastructure projects in underinvested communities that I think could be some food for thought for the county in terms of advancing green infrastructure. And then I'll close out with just a minute or two on what Gwinnett could actually do in this planning process and close out. So what is the problem? And thank you, Rebecca, for setting some of this up for me. In Chicago, we have a different problem than in Gwinnett County, and it's different depending on where you are in the country. In Chicago, all of our wastewater and stormwater goes into one pipe where it's all combined, and it goes to a treatment facility where it's treated and then released back into Lake Michigan for people to use. Here, it's all separated, and that's great because when you combine the two in a big pipe, things can go awry. The pipes are oftentimes a little too small to be used for that purpose, and so you end up getting sewage that's actually backing up into people's basements. You also can have nuisance flooding and problems with ponding and things like that. There's all kinds of major problems in addition to water quality problems, obviously, that can happen when you've got those contaminants all mingling together. But here in Gwinnett, you're lucky in that you have a separated sewer system. So what's happening in this community is when stormwater is falling on all of your rooftops, your paved surfaces like streets and sidewalks and parking lots, it's not able to get into the ground like it normally would do, right? And so it's running off into your storm sewer, and when it's running off, it's picking up all kinds of stuff that's on the ground. We all know there's fuel on the ground, there's chemicals, hydrocarbons, there's runoff from agricultural waste, and just all kinds of things on the ground that you wouldn't want to put in your water source. And so when it's running off, it's carrying all that with it, and then that water is going directly into your lakes, streams, rivers, estuaries, ultimately the ocean. And your water source is fed by stormwater right now, so it can really have an impact on the water quality in your water source. So this is just a visualization for you. This is San Francisco, but you can envision Gwinnett County in 1800 if you want to as well. But this is an example of a really urbanized area, just to give you a visual of back in the 1800s, maybe there were some outposts, maybe there were some, small homes, but it was a lot different of a scenario where when stormwater fell, it would largely be able to soak right into the ground, recharge your aquifers, recharge your lakes, and it wasn't the same water quality scenario because we don't have the variety of different chemicals at play anymore. Before at that point. In San Francisco, if you fast forward into current day, it's completely paved and there's rooftops everywhere. There's nowhere for water to really go and the sewers get overwhelmed. So just to give you another visual description of what that problem looks like. So really as we're growing and urbanizing, we're seeing increasing contamination, and that's true not only in super urban areas like San Francisco, but also in places like Gwinnett County where you're losing your natural resources, you're converting them to paved spaces, and then that is contributing to deteriorating water quality. So this is Lake Lanier. I know we already brought up Lake Lanier earlier in Rebecca's presentation. This is the sole source of water for Gwinnett County, and it's fed by stormwater. So it's really important to protect that water quality for your drinking water, for recreation, and also for the fish and wildlife that are in that water source, right? So one part of the solution can be green stormwater infrastructure. It is a way to mimic natural systems so that it essentially is acting like a big sponge that can just soak up stormwater where it's falling, so that it's either preventing it entirely from getting to the storm sewer or it's at least slowing it down. And on the way to slowing it down or capturing it, it's also cleaning that stormwater of the contaminants that you can see entering the water from all the different surfaces where it's picking up those contaminants. So green stormwater infrastructure is a way to use natural systems to manage stormwater that can slow it down, store it, and clean it. And there's a lot of different applications of this that you can use in different contexts. So I recognize that the green stormwater infrastructure in this picture might be kind of hard to see, and I'll go through some bigger examples of it, but you can really like scale it up or down depending on what the site constraints are, how much space you have, what the topography looks like, and all of those considerations. So I'll go through some examples to kind of bring it to life for you. So one of the more common stormwater infrastructure, green stormwater infrastructure facilities is called a rain garden. Have folks seen something like this before in and around the community? Okay, looks familiar. Thank you for the raised hand. So this is essentially a depressed area that acts like a bowl when it rains, and it fills up with water. It's intentionally situated where there's a low point on a property, and the engineers do their magic to kind of figure out where the best place is for facilities like this to be located so it can capture a lot of stormwater. And the rain garden is filled with rocks that can help trap bigger pieces of debris. It's got water-loving plants in it, like the ones that you see in the middle there that are usually taller, because the taller plants have deeper roots and they can store more water. And sometimes they're connected to a storm drain as well, so that they can have that additional water kind of overflow into a storm drain if it's a really big rain event. And these can be sized up and down depending on the property. They can be put in different locations. And they're a really common solution for green stormwater infrastructure. They can also blend in pretty nicely and just look like a landscaped area, which is nice. You don't have to have a big detention basin to have green stormwater infrastructure. You can also have something like a play field that has stormwater infrastructure located underneath it. So in this case, we took a vacant lot that wasn't really providing much stormwater function, and we put artificial turf field on top of it and underground detention underneath the turf, so that when it rains, the basin underneath just fills up with stormwater as a big bucket. And then the field is essentially always ready to use after the rain events, where if you've ever seen a field that's kind of at the bottom of a basin where a lot of fields are situated, oddly, you would think that would not be the case, but a lot of the time they're in kind of a depressed area. They get muddy, the grass gets torn up because they're not in the right spot, and they're not usable for a lot of the year. So this kind of prevents that situation from happening, and Greenprint has had the benefit of working with a lot of parks and schools where this has really come in handy. And then you can also pair it with other things like, where's that fancy? There we go. Like a rain garden that can help to also soak up stormwater if that is, if that's what you're into. And then this is just another example of how you could kind of get some of those facilities kind of, did I lose it again? Sorry, y'all. There we go. Get kind of rain gardens that are lining an athletic field to slow down the stormwater and capture it as a way to make those fields and play spaces usable. And then this is kind of the next step of, I promised we would talk about equity in green stormwater infrastructure, and this is a project example that I wanted to share with you from a green schoolyard project that we did in Philadelphia. This project is for the Sankofa Freedom Academy, which is a charter school in Philadelphia that focuses on an Afrocentric curriculum. It has a very specific philosophy to teaching. And not only do the enhancements for green infrastructure help with nuisance flooding on this schoolyard, it also is able to reflect some of the cultural heritage of the Sankofa traditions. It includes plantings that have the flag's colors from Ghana, green, red, and yellow. Those were intentionally selected. And they also brought in some native plants from Ghana into the project to kind of reflect the heritage as well. So there's just different things culturally that we can do to embed equity in projects. And it also helps to revitalize sites that might not have the best investment or the most investment historically, as you can kind of see from the before picture up in the corner. Kind of needed a makeover. So green infrastructure is a tool that can advance equity. This is one reason that Greenprint focuses on green infrastructure, is because it's not only a way to help with climate resilience, with flood mitigation, nuisance flooding, but it also has the power to transform communities if it's put in practice in the right way. And the reason this is important is because historically certain communities have not had the same access to infrastructure investment as others. And I'll just be very specific about that. It's low-income Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities that are in urbanized areas that have predominantly felt the effects of disinvestment across the country. And so when we think about the opportunities we have now to direct infrastructure investment, it's really important to think about how we can be making amends with some of those historical disinvestments. And if you look across the country, you can see physically how that kind of manifests in the built environment. So why is green infrastructure a good tool for that? I think that it has a lot of potential to reverse negative environmental trends that have been the result of infrastructure disinvestment. So some examples of that are improving the quality of water, improving air quality, reducing the exposure to severe heat as a result of urban heat island. That's, if there's not vegetation or lighter colored pavement, it can get pretty hot in urbanized areas. And then, of course, localized flooding, of which the exposure of underinvested communities is typically higher. And then the other piece of it is not only taking away these negative impacts, but also increasing spaces that have an impact on the thriving nature of communities, right? Like providing revitalization for communities and opportunities to thrive. So making visible investments in communities helps to communicate worth. It also helps to increase access to natural spaces that can improve physical and mental health, as well as other positive health, community indicators. And then lastly, one thing that we focus on at Greenprint is community empowerment through the process to design, construct, and maintain green infrastructure, which is what I will spend just a couple minutes talking about right now. So I wanted to show this just briefly as a resource for anyone who might be more into this and want like a really thick technical guide on how to advance equity through green stormwater infrastructure. There's a link in the middle of the screen where you can actually download this guide for free. It is called the Equity Guide for Green Stormwater Infrastructure Practitioners, and it's a guide that Greenprint co-developed with the Green Infrastructure Leadership Exchange, published last year. And the exchange is a peer network of green stormwater infrastructure professionals across the US and Canada who are working to accelerate the implementation of green infrastructure in their communities. So this guide was co-developed with the exchange and with all the membership. And the purpose is to identify clear ways that equity can be advanced through these projects. These are the 7 goal areas of the guide. I'm not going to read them to you because then I'd have to kind of turn around and read them all out, but you can see them around the wheel there. And really the key thing to note about the 7 goals is that centering community is purposely in the middle of the wheel because of the integral nature of community input and feedback and direction of these investments. And so that is the first goal I'll talk through. I'll just talk through 4 of the goals instead of all of them, the ones that are most kind of pertinent to this process. So centering community is about elevating the voices of those who have not historically been included in processes so that they're essential partners in development of green infrastructure projects. And this can be applied to any type of public project or infrastructure project as well, not just green infrastructure projects. And the rationale is that certain communities have historically been excluded from these processes, and the act of including them intentionally is a step toward greater equity because we're considering those perspectives in the decisions and the investments that are actually coming to fruition. We also acknowledge that community members are the ones who are the experts in what needs to change in order to make their communities better and align with their vision. And so all of our processes at Greenprint incorporate a strong community lens, working closely with community stakeholders and compensating people for the time they spend on our processes as well. And then the other 3 goals I'll go through more quickly. So internal readiness is a note about making sure that when we do community-centered work or equity work, that we need to be prepared as staff members or facilitators or county officials to be able to authentically navigate those conversations so that we're not inadvertently causing harm or exacerbating past negative relationships. So just to note that this is really important and fundamental as well in terms of advancing equity through the work that we're doing. And then a couple of key goals that are relevant for green stormwater infrastructure. The first is on siting and investment, making sure that we're selecting sites in partnership with communities based on where they think infrastructure investment should be located, and also considering how equity can best be advanced through those projects. And then the last thing is benefits-driven project development, acknowledging that green infrastructure can have a lot of different benefits. Those benefits can be defined in conjunction with community members and then executed through the projects, making sure that they sort of fit the vision that community members have defined, and also maintaining projects so that they continue to meet those multiple benefits. And what multiple benefits, you ask? There are a lot of them. There's a bunch that are on this slide. And again, I won't read all of them to you because I assume you can see at least the bolded words on the screen, but they're things like having healthy minds and bodies, improving safety, beautification and revitalization of communities, providing social spaces. And there's even ones that you can probably brainstorm that aren't up on the screen, like providing education, improving educational awareness of the water cycle and stormwater management, and the way that green infrastructure works. So a couple of notes just to close out. One, that is a picture of me, by the way. Apologies, you can see me. It's kind of meta to facilitate 2 things at once. But this is a program that we are working on in Cook County. It's called the Rain Ready Program Implementation. And the Rain Ready plans are a series of plans that were created and adopted in 2017 for 6 South suburban Cook County communities in the Chicagoland area. These communities are among the most underinvested in our region in Chicago, and primarily low-income communities of color. The plans identified a series of stormwater management and green infrastructure projects that could happen because this area is just chronically inundated with flooding. Either riverine flooding, they have a significant water body in the Southland, but also just nuisance flooding and basement backups and things like that. So our process is funded by the county, and it is, the county has dedicated $6 million in ARPA funding toward this program, where we're working hand in hand with resident steering committees. This is the one from Calumet City that we had 2 weeks ago. We are talking with them about what green infrastructure is, why it's important in their communities, what the plans say that they adopted 6 years ago, and then going through prioritization of which projects they would like to see advanced in their communities that would have the most benefit. And then because we have a big chunk of money, we're actually able to implement and construct those projects and then maintain them until 2026. So it's actually going from a plan to implementation and maintenance, which is like the planner's dream. I'm so excited that we actually have money to take something and make it happen. And the community members are just so enthusiastic about this as well because they really have control over this process. And so I just bring this up as one example of how a county potentially can make investments in communities within the county that can really build relationships with those communities, help direct resources toward those that need it the most, and like empower the residents to be co-creators in that process. So I wanted to bring up this example, but there's more to talk about there if we have time. And so lastly, I think I came up with a really simple answer to this that might seem like a little bit of a cop-out, but I think it's only fair. In thinking about what Gwinnett County might want to do in this planning process, I think I'm so enthusiastic about this entire forum series and how the county's approaching this process, because it's really about what the residents and the stakeholders in this county want to see happen here. Not about my perspective about the work that's happening at Greenprint, but how things like that can be transferred potentially in the context that you all have with what the communities want to do. And so I think just continuing to facilitate these kinds of conversations, really, bringing people along on your journey and listening, and then hopefully some green infrastructure makes it in to your plan. And I think you already are doing a lot related to water quality and green infrastructure facilities. So if there's anything to take away here, maybe it's just about more specifically targeting some of those resources toward underinvested parts of the county. And that's the end of my presentation. I would encourage anyone to reach out to me. I've linked my email here. Also have linked the equity guide again for you if that can be a resource. It's a really dense document, so please don't try to read it all in one sitting. It's got hundreds of pages, but it's a really good reference guide if you have a specific question that you want some more information about. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll look forward to the Q&A later. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kristin. I appreciate your keen insight and the presentation on green infrastructure. Thank you. I got it. You got it?
I'll come up on stage.
Okay. And its impact on the community. I do recall you saying that two things that is impactful in a positive way is reducing communities' exposure to harm, as well as increasing opportunities to thrive. So thank you so much for sharing that. Next, I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Dan Burden, Director of Innovation and Inspiration at Blue Zones. Innovation and Inspiration. I love that title. He leads the company in reinventing streets, neighborhoods, and towns with bikeability solutions. He is the nation's most recognized authority on walkability, bicycle and pedestrian programs, street corridor and intersection design, as well as traffic flow and calming road diets. You ever heard that term before? Calming road diets and other city planning elements. The White House has recognized him as one of the top 10 champions of change in transportation. Time magazine called him one of the 6 most important civic innovators in the world. His peers at, how you pronounce that? Planetison. Thank you. List him as one of the 100 most significant urban thinkers of all time. And he is the former Florida DOT bicycle pedestrian coordinator. So join me in welcoming Dan to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. It's been a while since I've been to the Atlanta region, although I've thoroughly enjoyed getting to see the Beltline for the first time. What an amazing thing you guys are achieving. Let me move to the side and not block the screen. My whole purpose in presenting walkability and placemaking is to get back to people and to get away from speed and trying to build more traffic, which 80 years we've proven you can't do. You've got to focus on urban planning, urban design, and good places for people to live if we're to be successful. So I was so pleased to find out that your plan is really got the right language on where you would like to be, to focus on walkability, sustainability, obviously greening, and bringing everything together. So in my short presentation time, these are the topics I wish to cover. And with that, I'll move right in. If we keep building for cars, we're going to get more cars. If we start building for people, we're going to have fewer cars and actually better driving conditions than we're getting. We're truly heading toward the end of a dead-end street. And the cities that have figured it out the best have learned to focus on what they value, what they care about. And by doing that, getting away from the things that they're afraid of, which is where they're headed currently when they build for the wrong things, right? A very simple principle. If you think about why cities existed throughout all of human history, it's for trade, it's for exchange. But more than just for money exchange, it's exchange of ideas, knowledge, wisdom. And truly, that means building our cities for people. It also ties us into our health. About 80% of how long a person lives is up to us. The lifestyles we adopt, the foods we eat, and only 20% is controlled by genetics. That's really good news. So the more active we are, longer we're going to live, and the healthier we're going to live. I also take my inspiration from placemaking. Can everybody see this tiny blip of happiness in America? And when it happened? In the 60s. Now, this is what the 60s looked like. And I know I was there. But today, the same park, Bryant Park in New York City, now looks like this because we figured out the mistakes we made and we corrected the mistakes. One of them was just to be able to let people look into the park as well as out of the park, and that created all the security in the world. The little stupid things that were done, but today are working. But now I want to focus on stupid things to do with streets. The road in the upper section only has to move about 18,000 cars a day. That's a small amount of traffic that can be handled in 2 lanes. And the lower route, which is built for people and lower speeds on purpose, will handle 56,000 cars. So we can keep doing the things that are going to cause us to have to go for more ways to treat water and fail because the water gets hot and it gets full of things we don't want. So the concept is referred to as completing our streets. If you look at the street on this scene on the left, we have industrial buildings and utility poles, and on the right we have housing and some green infrastructure. Both are part of a complete street. You have to design for what the land uses call for, but when we get the right elements together, we can have a green street. And by the way, there is a sidewalk there. It's set back far enough that it is actually comfortable. So, getting into some of the principles of walkability, today a small fraction of people will walk or bike to common destinations, certainly for commuting. What people want is to be separated, fully separated from traffic. And the more we can control the speed of traffic, the better it is for walking. The same is basically true of bicycling, that if we want to serve all people, and by the way, 60% of all Americans say they would walk and bike a lot more if we could get levels of service that you see in the first 2 panels rather than the third and the fourth. But we need more than that. This is a good indication of a place people would not walk to. I think you can decide why. What if you added sidewalks and crossings? Maybe a little. What if you added green? A little more. But it's not until you address your land use planning issues that people would feel watched over and now come and populate the park and so on. So it's too simple to just say, well, we just need sidewalks or crossings. Yeah, that's a basic amount. The bridge you see on the left became the bridge on the right. I'm very proud of that. That's in Olympia, Washington. But look how much more comfortable it is on the right. So there was a sidewalk. People were crammed right up against moving traffic, but Now they have a buffer and a really nice walking experience. So let's get into the land use side. I like to say that our direction to move toward small, walkable scale neighborhoods, it's the answer. Basically, we're referring to them as the 15-minute city, that you can walk anywhere to parks, schools, some retail, even jobs within 15 minutes. That's a walkable scale. I'll show that in terms of on the right, what we have been building, which forces more traffic. I think you can see why, if your child wants to play soccer, it's 4 trips, right? But what if from the left-hand side of the blue marker or orange marker, you have more street connectivity and more things where they belong, then the child can walk or bike, or even if you did drive, it's a very short drive and so on. So what we're looking at is more connectivity and building in what you see. But we also have to have the right level of scale of buildings. This is one I'm in love with. It's in Monterey. It has a 7-screen movie theater. Also has a shoe shop, dining and deli, and even a tarot card reading shop. And that's on 1/3 of 1 acre and no parking required. It's done right. So this is what we're really talking about, moving away from conventional, which is vastly what's been built in Gwinnett County, and build more of what you see on the right. And then people can live there. They have a much quieter environment, and their homes retain their value much better. This is what it looks like when you build it. You can see the empty lot. The building was built here, and I think if I were to measure this correctly, it's about 16 units per acre. Very nice. And because they built that unit, now they can pay for the park, pay for the green infrastructure. So you need a certain amount of construction before you can afford some of the things you need. Now let's get into the big one, and this is really big for Gwinnett County. I was asked to work with a developer, reviewed what he had done, and it's really a nice layout overall, but I said you don't have enough connectivity. Now some of the connectivity can just be for walking and biking. Doesn't have to be all for cars. I think you can see, let me go back, that what we're able to do is connect into the next neighborhood that would be built, so the traffic didn't have to go out to the big road, Mission Road it was called, and come back in on the other neighborhood. It was all nicely connected, and now we could take this high capacity utility corridor and turn that into a trail. So all the things that need to go in can be done in that scale. So just a real quick graph to show how it's done. If you have very low connectivity requirements, then you can't build a pleasant place to walk. But if you have a certain perimeter for each block, then people can walk, and they can walk dozens of different ways to get to the same destination, but they still won't walk. We have to have the land uses, right? And now we have the 15-minute city. So all of the code that you're writing in the vision need to include every element in order for it to work. This is a nicely scaled, probably the most shown ever for urban design, that we always used to build for internal trips, always. And then we started building after, say, 1950, where everything was dislocated. And that's what forced all the traffic that we are part of, right? And so what we're saying is we're going to go back to more internal trip capture. So you don't have to go out to the big road. Anybody know who the designer of this city was? A U.S. president. It's a good guess. George Washington. He was a surveyor. And it's interesting, now when we come to the Atlanta area, you see that this number of miles of roads was built, but because of poor connectivity, you only have 21% of them actually doing any work. So that's the result of, I'm told that in this community, the traffic is about as bad as anywhere in America because of the poor connectivity. Likewise, your streets need to have good orientation. So you can see here, this rebuild in Tampa, how everyone now has beautiful view of the water, of the buildings. So the land way back, which are the most affordable homes, are now worth as much as the homes closer to the water because they're now connected visually. Let's quickly do economics. You've got a speaker coming in that's going to really nail it on that topic. But this is a community I got to work in. The town bought up the entire strip center and built the buildings you now see on the right. They built their city hall, their library, everything. And it increased the value of land 800% by building it that correct. A tale of two cities, so to speak. Portland chose not to spread outward and outward and outward. And during 1980, 1990, they were able to reduce the property taxes 29%. They also improved their air quality, I'm sure water quality as well, and neighborhood quality, all improved in the right direction. Same 10-year period, Atlanta chose to build outward sprawl pattern, and they had to raise their taxes 22%. And then, of course, a lessening of air quality and a lessening of livability. So this is why it's important. I'm going to quickly go through how do we get our sensibilities back. Anyone just toss out a number. How fast do you think people would drive on this street? Yeah, that's a very common guess, and it's actually pretty close to the truth. But what if we did this? 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 Now, the planner and the engineer have done everything they're allowed to do, but now they've set the stage for the developer to come in and do this. I can guarantee you the speeds will be under 19 miles an hour. And now the property values go up, livability goes up, everything goes up. So what are the parts? It doesn't matter whether you're rural or more urban in form, the parts are the same, but how we do them may be different. This one's a nice green infrastructure, right? Even pervious parking, or in this case, with the medians and with the beautiful treatment on the greening, they've been able to really create an authentic gateway into their downtown. This is where I live. And now, how do we fix these broken streets? That's big. So we go with, say, this street. This is where Purdue is. We take out the unnecessary lanes. The lanes are doing nothing. Most traffic moves through intersections. And so we fix the intersections, but we can take down the width of the street and put in the green infrastructure we need. So I got to work on this project. It's in Toronto. Here's why it works. The word road diet. This used to be 4 lanes. They took it down to 2. They had to move 18,000 cars a day. They just had to. But because of the intersections working even better than they had before, they're able to handle all the traffic and less paving, far less paving, and now more green infrastructure. Seattle is leading the nation in this movement. They're up to their 32nd road diet. They're basically greening up their streets in a very significant way. Florida's doing a pretty good job. This used to be 4 lanes. The speeds have come down. Traffic moves better. Walking and bicycling now work better. This used to be 36 feet wide, and it was inefficient. Think of how long you have to set the signal cycles for 36 feet for pedestrians. By taking it down to 20, you can award more green time to the motorists. So it all makes sense. This is one of my all-time favorites. This is Asheville. Before, the 5-lane road you see on the top is what we are really trying to corral, get it down to 2 lanes. And we were able to do it, but this was the magic. A roundabout will handle 30% more traffic than a conventional signalized intersection. There's less stop time, more cars can move, and 90% safer. So it's a really good direction. You can see up further where we're able to knock the 4 lanes in this portion down to 1 lane in each direction, make it easy to get across the street. And likewise, this is my closing set of slides. What we should be doing is bring the change that we seek to build people in place and to make it fair and easy for people to get across the street. By the way, one of my favorite characters is Bill Murray. And I think he's right here that our strategy from here going forward needs to be building the things that we want to live in the future. What we've built in the last 40, 50, 60 years is sad. It's just real sad. And it's not one county or one region of the country that's built wrong. The whole nation, for the most part, has built really bad. So I've got one of the best jobs in the world. I get to go out, inspire people, pump up the energy, amp it up to where we now start to build for people in place. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dan. We appreciate that, sharing your knowledge and expertise on walkability and solutions to reduce traffic stress and create 15-minute cities. So we appreciate you. So as they get the chairs together, all right, thank you. So roundabouts, 90% make the roads 90% safer. Did you know that? Wow. Cocktail trivia there. So thank you for sharing that. So now we're going to have Q&A, but I'm going to start off with a couple questions. So get your questions ready because you'll have this opportunity to talk to them. So my first question is to both of you, so either one of you can answer that. Your talk showed that changing the way we build our communities can improve our physical health and the health of our environment. Can you talk about the social and economic benefits as well?
I'm happy to do that, but I don't want to.
Thank you.
Okay. Very significant that when we build towns for people in place, sociability goes way up. In fact, there was a beautiful study done by Donald Appleyard where he measured speed and volume of traffic on roads. He found out when volumes and speeds were low, people on average had 3.1 friends, real true friends, that they could go to at any time on their block. And about, I think it was 17 associates, people you'd go to find out what car to buy or whatever. And as speeds went up, the social issues of the street fell to 0.09 friends. And people often vacated the front of their homes to live more in the rear of their home. So it's huge. Yeah. So it's very significant. Economics, you've got a great speaker who's going to really nail that. But again, I mentioned 800% more value to land. If you build for people in place, that more than covers all the costs in running a city or a county. And so it's just huge what we've wasted on our cars. Another good statistic is if you put in $1 for walking, society has to pick up 8 cents. If you bicycle, society has to pick up $1. If you use transit, it's $1.50. But if you drive a car, society has to pick up $9.80 for the $1 you put in. It's huge.
Yes, absolutely. Want to share?
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, what comes to mind for me, I think, is the the transportation and stormwater infrastructure investments that we make are sort of paving the way for revitalization and other economic development, like Dan was mentioning in his presentation. I think that it usually is the precursor to development. It's what draws development to happen, right? What we need to be careful about is displacement of folks when that happens. When houses are all of a sudden as valuable as the ones that are waterfront, it's very challenging to retain people in their homes. The same is true for green infrastructure that happens across the country. There's some big examples. There's one in Chicagoland called the 606 Trail. That's a Rails to Trails project where it's an amazing, beautiful multi-use path on an elevated railroad corridor, and it's resulted in all of this displacement all along the trail because of the elevated property values. So the solution there is to work hand in hand across departments at the city or the county to plan proactively for affordable housing or maintaining rents, like whatever interdisciplinary strategies can be put in place to help mitigate that, because it's really market driven and markets are not subject a lot of the time to the regulations that the cities have at their disposal. So I think it's important to be proactive and also to just continue talking to folks realistically about the impacts of that investment and what actually could end up happening. I think we both talked about the social impacts to some extent, and I think that's really the fundamental purpose of the green infrastructure investments to us, is creating that strong social network and revitalization. So I think that's all I would say.
Awesome, thank you. Dare I ask Dan, how many bicycles do you own?
I'm embarrassed, probably about 16. I have 3 electric assist bikes. I live in a very hilly town, and I like to shop, so I carry heavy loads. But I rarely drive a car.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I don't know when the last time I was on a bicycle, and I'm ashamed to say I do drive a lot, and I think we have to do that sometimes in this metropolitan area, but I look forward to maybe purchasing a bike soon. Thank you. One last question that I have before we ask for follow-up is, we've heard that preserving green space, of course, is a top priority for Gwinnett County. Yet undeveloped land is easier and cheaper to build on. What advice would you have for focusing on redevelopment so green space can be preserved, other than what you've shared already, Kristin?
So for redevelopment, you're talking about and reinvesting in existing areas,
Yes.
right? As opposed to
And it's using
developing
undeveloped
land.
areas.
Yeah, I think that what we're really looking at when we're talking about redevelopment is retrofitting existing land that's already been through a process of, removing the existing historical natural resources that were there, grading and leveling the site, and then developing it. So like you've kind of removed that historical natural context already. So it's really about getting back to some of those natural systems and reinstating them so that you can utilize the natural processes to help manage the stormwater or other, if you want to revitalize other natural features that have been historically present as well. I think it's really challenging in an urbanized environment to create the space for that. And so thinking about natural solutions that are a really good fit for a more urban context. One example that I didn't show is something like curbside bioswales. I think you also showed some of those examples too, where if you have like a mixed use area or a commercial development, you can locate those alongside roadways so that they can soak up stormwater that's running off from the street. And it also provides wonderful beautification, it protects people from traffic. And so I think a lot of those like site-specific solutions are really powerful in the more urban context. And I only own 1 bicycle.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that next. At least you have one, right?
My husband has like 6.
I would add an example of a best practice in Seattle. There's a neighborhood they've recently rebuilt called High Point, and it's just absolutely amazing. The water leaves I think it's 2,000 home neighborhood cleaner than it came from out of the sky. It's just amazing what they've done. It's all for affordable housing, and it's every type of housing you could dream up, very well connected, very green, and one of the greatest places anyone could ever dream up, and definitely one of the most diverse parts of all of Seattle.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Do we have any questions in the audience? Okay.
My name is Kristin, and my husband's from Germany. So we debate positives and negatives all the time. And one thing we detest is the amount of violence that the American public is subjected to with mass shootings. So do any of you three envision perhaps more equity in the mental health area to help the American public trust the government officials that they won't be shot at if they go to a church, a supermarket, a concert?
Well, I'm not for guns. I think there's a place for guns, but not for every teenager to go out and buy a mass killing machine. I have tried to track where the child grew up, what the life was for the child, and the fact that they had a poor network of friends, that they felt isolated. I think there are a lot of things we've been doing wrong with our communities that has created this isolation and so on, but it's a tough issue that we so far aren't willing to grapple with. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
I really enjoyed both your presentations, and I loved the sustainable greenery, and I loved the mixed-use housing, reinventing. A lot of what you did, sir, was have the 15-minute walkable communities, and so that you just talked about a community just now. How do you, in a mixed-use environment with shops and specialty stores and larger, maybe a 4,000 square foot and a 2,000 square foot home, how do you come up with a price point that represents what affordable housing is? What is that formula? I've discussed it. I'm a licensed real estate professional, and I cannot give one answer on what it means to have affordable housing with a price point. What's your formula?
I think every city in America is facing this issue. Our town only has 10,000 people, but I'd say 70% of our traffic is people driving into our town to provide the service industry. Even our policemen and firemen can't afford to live in our community, but we're tackling it by changing all of our land use code to now make it easy to build more accessory dwelling units. My wife and I already have 3 lodgings on our property. It's a 12,000 square foot lot, and we're going to build 2 more. And our city allows that. So we want to make sure we don't have policies in our town that keep us from having people being able to live there and provide the services that are needed in our community.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add to that. I'm not an affordable housing expert, but I think it's a very complicated question for each city that should be looked at individually, and also taking into account things like transportation cost as a result of where housing is located, because that comprises a big chunk of income for folks. But there's a lot of tools out there that can help get to some of those questions. There's one that was by the Center for Neighborhood Technology called the H+T Index, but I think that's since evolved to another tool, maybe at the federal level. So there's a bunch of stuff out there if you're interested in digging more into that. Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of municipalities have minimum parking requirements and have a lot of land is used for parking. So how do you go about kind of challenging that? Because a lot of people, like to drive, and and the parking, requiring parking, increases the traffic, so.
Yeah, great question. Not only do we overfund building more highways that build more traffic, but we make parking free. And the cities that really get it now are getting away from minimum parking required to maximum allowed. So another one of the wonderful changes we made in our community is that there's no parking required for any new housing. And our streets are a natural place to park. And if a developer says, well, no, the market really wants me to put in 1 or 2 spaces, great, but don't require it in order. In fact, that drives up the ability to have affordable housing. 25% of the cost of the house is in parking and storing the car, right? So it's huge, and so thank you for bringing up that issue. Wonderful speakers that address this topic, and I'm not an expert in parking, but I follow it because like a third of good cities are devoted to pavement because we're trying to have 7 or 8 or 9 parking spaces per car in our cities. It's stupid.
I know the next forum I believe is going to have someone from the Parking Reform Network, which I know my old coworker was one of the founders of the Parking Reform Network, and they will speak for lots of time about exactly that issue, I think.
Thank you, Kristin. Appreciate that.
Yep.
Sir.
I have 2 quick questions. One is about roundabouts. I have a bias in favor of roundabouts, and sometimes your bias will prevent you from seeing things. Is there any downsides to a roundabout? Because I don't see any.
I probably have inspired over 500 roundabouts in our country so far. I'm working on 9 in one community right now and 3 in another community. Roundabouts have almost all plus. They slow traffic, they move traffic better, they're far safer, they're greener, everything you could dream up that would be something you want in favor of the environment or people or health, the roundabout provides. The downside is you can't build them everywhere. I will kick my engineer in the shins under the table when he says, I can't figure out how to do this one. I've got the best roundabout engineer in the country. And I've gotten him to build roundabouts where even he didn't think he could because the buildings were so close or whatever. But there's so many variations of design that we're able to get roundabouts in streets that otherwise most engineers would say I can't do it. But there are only a few places we just can't save the intersection. Then we go for compact intersections, making the intersections more efficient because by building for every mode, every use, now we can make it more efficient. But every intersection has its capacity, its threshold. And one of the things I always push for is don't go for levels of service, right? How many cars you can move for your peak hour, your peak moment, or your peak event. If it's a fairground or something, go for who needs to use this whole intersection all the time, so that you're really creating the type of balance and mode share that you're seeking in your community. Great question.
One more quick question. If you're building, if you're renovating an older property, for instance, and either a neighborhood or a building that was built in the 40s or the 50s, there's going to be asbestos, chlorodyne. There's going to be some things that honestly is usually better just to leave there, encase them or something. But if you're going to be doing it, have we addressed those, how we're going to handle situations like that?
Boy, that's out of my arena. Yeah, I'm sorry. Hopefully another speaker will be able to answer that for you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm going to say a tough one. I have a background in planning. I've lived here almost 30 years. And I'm going to tell you what the problems we have here. The problem is it was one of the fastest growing counties in the country during the 90s and early 2000s. This was a very rural county. There's still a lot of that mindset here. I fully agree that we need high density. That's one reason why I'm pushing to get a transit expansion here and possibly a rail line up here. How do we sell that to the public here?
I think what we're doing in this series is helping. And keep in mind, it only takes a couple percent of the people to become very well informed that because they're residents, they're business leaders, their voice matters a lot, more so than the people who don't become informed and just have whatever theory of why things can't work. So this is an amazing thing the county is doing, putting on this series. Yeah.
I would add to that, and that's the second planner that I've met today, so it's like an overrepresentation of planners in this room, proportionate to the population. I think that one thing to think about is, and I've worked in a lot of communities where that's the case too, it's like they want to shut the door behind them and not let anyone else come develop and live in the community. And I think there's something to honoring the sort of history and the heritage of the community and like what has happened historically. Maybe there's a way to preserve some of that in certain parts of the county. I'm not as familiar as I could be with all of the history, but I think it's also important to hear those voices and to maybe find a way that can be accommodated, whether it's through like preservation of natural spaces or conservation style development where they can
TDR.
You can get to it in some of those ways where you can have more urbanized parts that are served by transit, and you can also have, you know, more rural locations that have some of those, you know, different types of community characteristics that they might be looking for. So
Next question.
Hi, I'm speaking as a resident of the county and not employee of the county. I grew up in Taipei, Taiwan, and I've been in the county for less than 2 years, I think. Yeah, as a resident. Yeah, and I wanted to kind of actually make a comment of the question that he just spoke of. Maybe some of these people are actually very, very supportive of the idea. They may not come to one of these community meetings. I would tell a story that I wanted to walk from Norcross to Peachtree Corner to Sprout one time. My husband, who grew up in the States, was extremely uncomfortable that I wanted to do that. So I was going to prove to him I can do it. Put on my backpack, I'm gonna buy something there. I start walking, and he followed me on the bike until I crossed Peachtree Industrial Parkway, a really busy road. Until he saw that I safely crossed it, and I can get to my destination, he turned around bike home. And I wanted to tell Louis and Matt, like many of the residents may be very supportive of the idea. They just may not be, you know, in some of the meetings there. So find them. Yeah, and our county is so diverse, full of people who grew up in walkable cities. And yeah, that's just my comments. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Any other questions? Okay. Excuse me, ma'am.
Hello. My name is Rolf. My wife already said that I'm from Germany. So I have experience with public transit. I have experience with walkable neighborhoods. Our girls, when they started elementary school in Germany, first grade, we took them from our home to school for the first 1 or 2 weeks, and then they went by themselves. Every day, a group of people, all first graders, and there was no problem with that. I wouldn't dare to do that here in the US. And that is a really, really big difference. Another thing I want to say is bicycle paths. I live in Swanee. Beaufort Highway, right next to Swanee Town Center, has just been renovated. And they again made a big mistake. They put the bicycle path right next to the traffic lane. So lane, bicycle path, parking area, pedestrian way. And the bicycle path is just separated by a white line, and that's it. I have not seen a single bicyclist on that road. Lane, parking area, a little bit of separation, bicycle path, a tiny step, and a pedestrian pathway. That would be so much better, but I haven't seen that here. Yeah. Two things that I want to recommend. Sir, you're speaking from my heart. I've known all that, what you were talking about. Yeah. I'm dealing with that a lot, and I want to recommend two YouTube channels to everyone who's interested. One is Not Just Bikes, a Canadian, oh, I already see someone nodding, a Canadian who decided to live not in Canada or the US anymore. He moved to Amsterdam, and he describes all the differences, and it's so eye-opening, and well done. And the other YouTube channel is City Beautiful, about city planning, and I believe you know both channels.
I do.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to take one other question, one last question from someone who has not asked a question. Thank you.
Hi. Many major arterials run through Gwinnett County, and they're owned by different departments, such as the Georgia Department of Transportation, and each of them have different values and priorities. And so how can road improvements be coordinated between both many departments who own these roads?
This is a very common problem, and that is the state is charged with moving a lot of traffic regionally. The counties likewise have a big task in front of them, and local communities as well. There needs to be a coordinating council where all of the organizations, planners, engineers, architects, landscape architects, come together to figure out what is the best solution for a road, not to just become worsening the problem, and perhaps just have one criteria: how is this change going to benefit people walking, transit, people bicycling? The motorist is always going to be cared for. That's a guarantee. But we need to have that same guarantee for anyone who lives on the street, who walks, who bikes, or uses transit. And truly, that's just got to be the baseline here going forward. Yeah, great question.
Awesome, thank you. I think I have one more question, one quick question.
Okay, I'll make it quick. Okay, thank you. Like it was stated before, obviously Gwinnett County is growing so fast, which is fantastic. However, that means there are negatives that are going to increase with it: food insecurity, unemployment, homelessness. Now, there have been some cities where you've seen a unique bench that you can't sleep on, but it's really cool to sit on. And it's stated that it's done on purpose to deter homelessness, obviously. And so obviously we're not promoting like, come over and be unhoused here, obviously, but at the same time, this isn't a problem. So what, from your point of view, what can we do to, I'm not saying make them more comfortable, but we're facing the problem in a realistic manner when it comes to infrastructure of the city. If that makes sense.
Yeah, a lot of benches got pulled out because of feeling of security and real security issues. The real answer is we've got to populate our streets, our parks, and so on. Have eyes on these places. People who are homeless need to be watched, cared for, right? But they don't need to be creating a problem. And I'll just use as an example, when we put in benches that you can't rest on, or we pull the benches out completely, we're hurting our ability to be more sociable, more crime-free. Police departments that really get it, they really watch over and they care for those who are homeless because they know, they understand how to watch the city. And I'm always amazed at the cities that figure this one out and do the right thing as opposed to making it more harsh more impossible for a person to survive in a community.
Thank you for that. Let's give another round of applause to our speakers, Kristin and Dan. Good information, good questions, good responses to start the conversation. So thank you so much for attending tonight. We are excited to have you here. This was a nice, intimate crowd with great questions, and we hope you enjoyed your experience. I also want to thank the TSW staff and consultants for everything that they've done to make this event a reality. And of course, we couldn't do it without Gwinnett County, the leadership and the team there. So thank you so much. But I do have a few announcements before we depart. If you did not get an opportunity to participate in the engagement activities out in the lobby this evening, please make sure you stop by the tables and engage just for a few minutes if you can. Did everybody get a chance to engage? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Did you engage? Okay. We're going to need you to do that before you leave. It's only going to take a few minutes, okay? You're going to be able to provide some comments and recommendations and then complete a survey with on an iPad or a QR code. So you'll see that on the high boards outside. So please do that. Your input is very, very important. Also, get your calendars out, your notebook. Please save the dates for upcoming events. So our third and final Speak Up Community Education Speaker Series will be held on July 12th. July 12th at the Red Clay Theater. But that is on the website as well. But guess who's going to be in attendance? We're going to have a national keynote speaker named Joe Minicozy of Urban 3 and Tony Jordan of Parking Reform Network. And the topic is going to be about connecting communities through redevelopment. And that's also where Kristin mentioned that we're also going to talk about parking and redevelopment reform right there. Save the dates for land use community workshops, AKA Daily Community Cafe. Going to have a second one on Thursday, tomorrow, June 29th, from 5 to 7 at Lucky Shoals Park Community Recreation Center in Norcross. Who knows where that is? Okay, and if you don't, look it up if you have time. Spread the word to your neighbors to come on out, because what's going to happen in these workshops is we're going to assess how Gwinnett is growing and discuss strategies to guide growth to create healthy, strong, and resilient communities. And so at the Daily Cafe community, you will place an order, want to give you a story of how it works. You're going to place an order for the communities you'd like to focus on. So remember that. Then you're going to tell us what flavor of community development that you think works best for you. Does that sound good? This is your opportunity. So spread the word, tell your friends and family, come on out to the table. We really need your input. You can also visit GwinnettCounty.com to learn more about upcoming events and engagements to stay up to date. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate your support and look forward to seeing you at future events. Thank you.